Greetings, folks. Iolair here. Just a quick preamble before I get to the main part of today's video. I want to stress that my thoughts and opinions expressed in this video are based on my initial impressions of the Odin and my initial experiences in the few games that I've had with her. Your experience with the Odin may be quite different, and so I always invite folks to add their thoughts, opinions, comments, and questions to the comments below so that others may benefit from other people's perspectives. And also, if you have a very good match in the Odin or something that's very instructive, feel free to send it over. I would be very happy to take a look at any replays that folks think would be an interesting watch, and be happy to consider putting it up on the channel for others to enjoy as well. And so with that, I hope you enjoy today's review. Greetings, folks. Iolair here. Welcome and thank you very much for joining me in my review and first impressions of this long-awaited and highly anticipated premium tier-VIII German battleship, the Odin. Now, as I did with my review of the Aegir, I'm going to break this up into two videos. This video is going to be gameplay with commentary about how I think she will best perform in game and how I think she might be best played. And then the other video, which I'll leave a link to in the description below, I go to port and I cover her specifications in gory detail. I cover my build in more detail and some options that you may want to consider, and then also some final thoughts about the ship. So this is an all tier 8 domination match here on Crash Zone Alpha. There are 2 carriers per team. There are lots of battleships, not much in the way of cruisers and destroyers. And for my own, I have elected to go with a full tank concealment build, and that's what I would recommend other players take as well, which I'll get to in more detail here in a moment. Now I'm pushing over here to the north side of the Charlie Cap to light up this Erland. One of the capabilities of the Odin is that she does carry hydroacoustic search. This is the same hydro that we get on the Bismarck. It's 5-kilometer detection on ships, 3.5-kilometer detection on torpedoes. I have sent torpedoes here on my starboard side in anticipation that the Erland might cut back more towards the middle of the cap, but I did get detected by planes, so he knows that I'm coming this direction, and I can reasonably anticipate that he is going to send torpedoes once I'm detected here again. I am going to fire. I am going to cut back, make a hard port turn here, but he's actually going to send his torpedoes short, which is going to kind of put me directly in their path. Now, one of the other capabilities, obviously, of this Odin that I just demonstrated is that she does have torpedoes. She has a quadruple launcher on each side of the ship, and they are sort of the rear wing-mounted style that you see on the Graf Spee. So their firing angles from the rear are excellent. The forward firing angles are pretty good. I don't know that they're as good as, let's say, on the Tirpitz, but they're definitely playable. But again, because they are the classic 6-kilometer range that the German battleships and cruisers have, it's obvious when you are sending torpedoes. You know, you're sort of telegraphing that you're going to be sending your torpedoes, and so opponents obviously know that they're coming, and ideally you're trying to send only when they're in a position that they can't escape the torpedoes, because I generally see a lot of players with these battleships with torpedoes tend to send them way too early, and you only want to send them early if you're in imminent danger of like going down, and you won't be able to get them off otherwise. Otherwise, you try to close the distance and get them to the point that it's a point-blank range send, and they simply can't avoid them. Now, I've turned back in here because we obviously want to get the Baltimore down. We did claim first blood by taking down the Erland. We now have just lost our second ship, an Sascha. I think that was down at the Alpha Cap, that which we did take originally. I'm using my torpedo indicator here to see which direction the Baltimore is headed. Obviously trying to come across here to pincer and cut him off, but it looks like the continuous stream of fire that he's facing more from our Kidd and our Bismarck is going to finish him off fairly quickly. We do take down in Alabama, what our carrier does. I don't remember exactly where that was. That may have been more in the middle of the map. So we are even on ships. We are losing Alpha, which, like I said, we did take earlier. And there goes the Baltimore. So now we can start pushing in toward Charlie. Okay, so now I want to kind of get to playstyle aspects of this ship. because I'm about to push in against two battleships, the Bismarck and the Vladivostok, and I can tell you right now that I don't want to try to engage these guys simultaneously. If I were in a Bismarck, I might be a little more comfortable, but in the Odin, this is not a position you want to be in. So I will say this right now, and I know this may come as a little bit of a disappointment for some players, but the Odin is not a battleship. The only aspect, for me, this is my impressions, for me, the only aspect of this ship that equates her to a battleship is her armor. And again, I'll go over her armor scheme and layout in port in the other video in more detail. But pretty much everything else about this ship, her guns, her health pool, she is not characterized as being a full-fledged battleship. The best way, in my experience so far in the games that I've played with her, is to play her as a Scharnhorst when the Scharnhorst is up tiered to a tier 8 or tier 9 match. Another way to put it would be to play her like an Aegir, play her like the Siegfried. You'll see that our kid here to my port is sending torpedoes. I think he's sending these in the direction of the Bismarck, but his torpedoes are just going to go directly into the island. This player in the kit, I think, was very new, and he didn't really understand exactly what was going on. He didn't try to help take the cap once we took down the Baltimore. But in any case, that aside, coming back to this play style, the Odin is going to be best played, I think, as the long-range, supercruiser, artillery supercruiser for most of the battle. There are going to be circumstances where you can push in. She does have the armor to tank to some extent like the battleship, but her health pool, and I know that many other community contributors and other reviewers have commented on this repeatedly, her health pool is not at the same level of other tier 8 battleships. So, for example, the Bismarck has almost 70,000 hit points. That's in fact, that's 31% more health than the Odin. So the Odin just doesn't have the health pool to be able to tank nearly as long as a Tirpitz or a Bismarck at this tier. Her armor is pretty close to these two, and again, I'll go into that in more detail. But for me, I'm going to be acting as sort of backup. I'm playing kind of the super heavy cruiser backup for this Bismarck as we go to engage this Vladivostok. Now, looking at the tactical situation, just coming back to the game in general, we obviously have a healthy secure on Charlie. The opponents have taken Alpha. They've run off our Wichita, although our Wichita has done a remarkably good job, and you'll see the results when we get to the leaderboard about his influence in the game. But we're now making our push towards Bravo. This Bismarck and I really want to take down the Vladivostok before we push too far in, but the Vladivostok is really going to be kind of taking us off the objective for quite a while until we get him down. Now there I just threaded a couple of torpedoes from the one of the carriers, and this is another aspect I want to cover on the Odin. The Odin has very good maneuverability, so I did not take any steering gear modifications. Her base rudder is 14 seconds or 14.1 seconds, and the turning circle is actually quite small for a battleship. It's less than 800 meters. And again, I'll go into more details in the other video in port to go over the gory details, but her handling generally is very good, and that allows her to thread these situations. Now, here's an example of where the Bismarck would be able to tolerate a shot like that more easily. Now, I don't think that shot from the Vladivostok got a citadel on me because the Odin does carry a turtle back. However, her upper armor belt is not as strong as the Bismarck, plus I was giving quite a bit more side. And with my lower health pool, taking a 15k chunk is, almost a third of my health in one salvo, and that's something that the Bismarck would be able to tolerate more easily. Now that was a mistake of mine. I should have learned my lesson the first salvo to not be quite angled out so much. Unfortunately, I took a second bad salvo. I am going to get all my guns on him this time, and then I will turn back in to try to mitigate the the next salvo if he sends it on me. You'll notice that I'm sort of toggling between high explosive and armor piercing here. Again, I'll go into more details on the specifications of the guns, but these are the 305 millimeter guns that are on the Aegir with a couple of differences. So first of all, the dispersion is worse than on the Aegir. So the Aegir gets full cruiser level dispersion and accuracy. Her dispersion is far less than 200 meters at her maximum range. The Odin is over 200 meters. It's like 230 roughly with the aiming systems, which is what I have. And there I do nicely get the Vladivostok down, and now I can push back in toward Bravo. So her dispersion is not as good as the Aegir. Her Sigma is actually very good. It's 2.0. So it's only her Sigma is only a little bit smaller, or a little bit worse, I should say, than on the Aegir. The Aegir is 2.05. So the shells will tend to be grouped pretty well, but the dispersion is wider at maximum range of 19.1 kilometers. So these are very playable guns, and you will have to, you will alternate between high explosive and armor piercing depending upon your targets. I was using more high explosive in this battle than I have in other battles. I'm experimenting basically at this point because this is, again, one of my earlier games. The other difference between these guns and the Aegir is that for some reason, these guns get a alpha of 9,400 for their AP shells for a Citadel hit, whereas the Aegir is 9,100. So I'm not sure why the difference is there, other than maybe Wargaming in their spreadsheet analysis determined that they needed to dial down the alpha on the Aegir to make her a little less, or bring her more in line with her peers. I don't know. One of the things that I think or a lot of people know was that immediately before the Odin's release here in 095, her reload was nerfed from 20 seconds to 23 seconds. Since I never played her with a 20-second reload, I can't tell that it's dramatically worse, or it feels like it's a serious nerf. I found with a 23-second reload, it's been pretty good. Obviously, the Aegir, because it has access to the 6th slot, upgrade slot, can get its reload below 18 seconds. That's pretty nice. But for the Odin, this is playable. So I guess the bottom line is play her as a super heavy cruiser most of the time. Even when you are top tier, I have found, even when I was top tier, facing even like tier 7 and tier 6 ships, I haven't been able to sort of lead the charge in the same way that I would be like if I were in the Bismarck, which has a much higher health pool, has bigger guns, has a better secondary complement, and I'll cover her specifications around secondaries when I go to port. So far in my experience, I've found that if I play her more as the long-range artillery cruiser for most of the battle, and then in select situations I can push in and either act as the bully if I'm not facing opponents with bigger guns or bigger health pools, then I found that playing that's the better way, at least in my experience, to play the Odin. Now I also want to get to, this is why I have taken a full tank concealment build. Because I don't see her as being usually the front line driving, flank pushing battleship, the same way that the Bismarck can or the Tirpitz can at that tier, being able, and because you have this lower base health pool of 52,800, you really want to maximize your endurance by maximizing your concealment, maximizing your endurance through maximum heals, reduced fire duration, reduced fire and flooding chance, etc. All of these factors lead me to say the better build for this ship is going to be a full tank concealment build. Now, I know that in some previous reviews of the Odin, especially before she got some of her changes, when she had the higher health pool, when she had a health pool well above 60,000, some community contributors or at least one that I can think of, where was recommending, oh, Wargaming clearly wants this being played as a secondary build ship. I don't see it. She doesn't have as good of a secondary complement as the Bismarck. The firing angles on the secondaries are not very good. The number of secondary guns is not nearly as numerous as on the Bismarck. So I just, unfortunately, I didn't get the kill there as my shells were headed for the Lexington. But I would say I'm not trying to put too much of a negative damper on the ship. She is clearly a very capable ship. But I think if a player comes in expecting to play her as a full-fledged battleship, in my experience so far, that is going to be a disappointing experience. I don't think that she can play in a traditional battleship role. She has to be kind of like the Siegfried or the Aegir, where she, in select conditions, she can be the flank pusher and the cap driver. So that's kind of my review. This was a pretty typical game. I have had games well above 100,000 in damage, but I thought that this was kind of instructive in terms of some of her play characteristics. I got over 2,200 base XP, which is pretty good. But again, hats off to one of our Bismarcks and the Wichita on our team for doing a good job to help lead our team to a victory. So go over and check out the other video where I go to port in a lot more detail. I hope this review was interesting and useful for you. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and I wish you happy sailing.